A deer freezes the moment it hears your voice. Not your footsteps. Not your scent. Your voice. Its heart rate spikes. Its muscles tense. Within seconds, it's gone, vanished into the trees as if its life depended on it. Because it does. You might think this fear is ancient. Something written into the bones of every wild creature since the dawn of time. But it isn't. For most of life's history on Earth, animals had no reason to fear something like you at all. So what changed? Think about your own body for a second. No claws. No fangs built for tearing flesh. No raw speed to outrun a sprinting predator. On paper, you look almost harmless. A soft, slow, mostly hairless primate. And yet, somewhere along the way, you became the animal that every other animal learned to fear above all others. Not the lion. Not the wolf. You. That gap between how harmless you look and how feared you actually are is the strangest part of this story. It means the fear isn't really about your body at all. It's about something else entirely. Something animals figured out the hard way. Researchers Liana Zinet and Michael Clinchy spent years trying to answer that question. In 2019, they ran a deceptively simple experiment. They hid speakers in the wilderness and played different sounds to wild animals. Lion roars, dog barks, gunshots, and human voices, just calm conversation, nothing aggressive at all. The animals fled fastest and stayed away longest from the human voices. Not the lions. Not the gunfire. You. Think about how strange that result really is. A lion roar means an animal is broadcasting its location, often after a failed hunt, or simply marking territory. It's loud, but it's also somewhat predictable. A gunshot is sudden and violent, but brief, gone in an instant. A human voice, by contrast, is quiet, conversational, almost gentle by comparison, and it terrified the wildlife more than either one. That tells you something. The fear isn't about volume or sharpness or how frightening a sound is in the moment. It's about what that sound has come to mean, learned over time, encounter after encounter. This wasn't a fluke. A related study led by Justin Sirachi, alongside Zinet and Clinchy, set up camera traps and speakers across a stretch of wilderness in Boulder Creek, California. Badgers, bobcats, pumas, skunks. Across species, across habitats, the pattern held. The mere sound of a human talking sent these animals running far more often than the sound of their own natural predators. To these animals, you are not just another threat in the landscape. You are the threat. Now here's where it gets interesting. These same researchers had previously studied how fear itself reshapes an entire ecosystem, not just individual animals. When a predator's presence is felt, prey species change their behavior. They eat less. They move less. They spend more time watching and less time foraging, breeding, and resting. Multiply that stress across an entire population, and you get what ecologists now call a landscape of fear, a kind of invisible map laid over the physical one, where some areas feel safe and others don't, purely because of where a predator has been seen, heard, or smelled. And according to this research, no predator reshapes that invisible map more powerfully than you do. Why? Let's go back. Imagine a world before this fear existed. No flinching. No fleeing. Just curiosity. This isn't hypothetical. It's documented history. In 1835, Charles Darwin stepped onto the Galapagos Islands and recorded something almost impossible to picture today. He could walk straight up to birds, sit beside them, even nudge them with the end of his gun, and they wouldn't move. They had never seen a human before. They had no reason to associate you with danger. Darwin called it a kind of fearlessness that bordered on the absurd. Picture that scene for a moment. A finch hopping along a black volcanic rock, completely unbothered, while a stranger from another continent leans in close enough to touch it. No alarm call. No scattering. Just stillness and mild curiosity, the same way you might glance at an unfamiliar bird in your backyard. That's what an animal looks like before it has learned what you are. This phenomenon has a name. Ecological naivety. It shows up again and again on islands untouched by humans, in animals who evolved without ever needing to fear a two-legged predator. The dodo is the most famous casualty. It didn't fear sailors who landed on Mauritius because nothing in its evolutionary memory told it to. Within decades, it was gone. The dodo's story is often told as a tale of stupidity, a clumsy bird too dumb to survive. But that's the wrong lesson. The dodo wasn't stupid. It was simply unprepared, in the same way you would be unprepared for a threat that had never existed anywhere in your ancestors' lives. Evolution doesn't equip a species for dangers it has never faced. It only equips it for the dangers that have already tried and failed to wipe it out. So fear of humans isn't automatic. It isn't hardwired from birth like the fear a rabbit might show toward a hawk's silhouette, a response baked in by millions of years of aerial predators circling overhead. Fear of you is learned, or evolved generation by generation, when the cost of not learning it is extinction. And once humans showed up in large numbers, that cost became brutal. Here is the twist almost nobody expects. For most of Earth's history, you were not the most dangerous animal walking around. Lions, saber-toothed cats, and giant hyenas held that position for millions of years. Then, starting somewhere between 10,000 and 50,000 years ago, depending on the continent, something shifted. Mammoths, giant ground sloths the size of small houses. Car-sized armadillos called glyptodonts. Giant kangaroos in Australia. One by one, these massive, slow-reproducing animals vanished. Try to picture a ground sloth for a second. Some species stood taller than a giraffe when reared up on their hind legs, with claws the length of kitchen knives. For millions of years, almost nothing on the continent could threaten an animal that size. It had no reason to fear small, slow, clawless creatures walking on two legs. And that's exactly what made it vulnerable. Paleontologist Paul Martin proposed an explanation that still shapes the debate today. He called it the overkill hypothesis. As humans spread across continents, equipped with coordinated hunting, fire, and increasingly sophisticated weapons, megafauna that had never encountered a predator like this simply couldn't adapt fast enough. They reproduced too slowly to evolve a fear response in time. A mammoth might only have one calf every few years. A species can't out-evolve a threat on that kind of timeline. The result wasn't a fair fight. It was a wave of extinction that swept from continent to continent, following the timeline of human arrival almost exactly. Australia first, then the Americas. Each time, megafauna disappeared within a few thousand years of the first humans showing up. Not every scientist agrees on how much of this was caused by hunting alone versus climate shifts happening at the same time. The debate is still alive today. But the pattern of large, slow, fearless animals vanishing shortly after humans arrive repeats itself again and again, on continent after continent, in a way that's hard to dismiss as coincidence. Now picture the animals that survived. The ones quick enough, wary enough, adaptable enough to learn something the megafauna never did. Humans hunt differently than other predators. You don't just take down the old, the sick, the slow. Researcher Chris Darramont and his team studied this directly, comparing human hunting patterns to those of other predators across the globe. The findings were stark. Humans kill adult prey, animals in their prime, at far higher rates than any other predator on the planet. And when it comes to apex predators themselves, wolves, bears, big cats, humans kill them at rates dramatically higher than predator-on-predator conflict in nature. A wolf hunting a deer has to weigh the risk. A kick from an adult elk can break bones. A cornered boar can gut a predator that gets too close. So most predators in the wild target the young, the old, the injured, the ones least able to fight back, because the math of survival demands caution. You broke that math entirely. With a spear, then a bow, then a rifle, the risk of approaching a healthy adult animal dropped to almost nothing. You could kill from a distance an animal could never reach you from. No other predator on the planet does that at scale. Think about what that does to an ecosystem. Wolves that survive an encounter with humans don't forget it. Neither do their pack. Fear isn't just an individual response. It spreads. It gets passed down, taught from parent to offspring, reinforced every time a human's presence precedes danger. Across generations, entire populations recalibrate. The animals that linger too long around humans don't get to pass on that trait. The ones that flee at the first whisper of a human voice do. This is natural selection acting in real time, and it's happening faster than almost any other evolutionary pressure on the planet, because you are not a normal predator. You're a predator with tools, with memory, with the ability to hunt from 100 meters away and never be seen at all. But here's where it gets stranger. This fear isn't fixed. It isn't a one-way street carved permanently into a species' genetics. In 1959, a Soviet geneticist named Dmitry Belayev began an experiment in Novosibirsk that would run for decades, later continued by his colleague Ludmila Trut. He took silver foxes, wild and wary of humans, and began selectively breeding only the calmest, least fearful individuals. Generation after generation. Within just a few decades, something remarkable happened. The foxes weren't just behaviorally tamer. Their bodies changed too. Floppy ears, curled tails, patches of color in their fur that wild foxes never have. Nobody bred for floppy ears. Nobody selected for a curled tail or a patch of white fur. Belial only selected for one trait, calmness around humans. And yet, generation after generation, all of these unplanned physical changes came along for the ride, almost like a side effect of dialing down fear itself. It turns out that the genes controlling fear responses are tangled up with the genes controlling physical development in ways scientists are still working to fully understand. What Belial proved is something profound. Fear and tameness toward humans are not separate from biology. They're biology. Malleable, breedable, reversible under the right pressure. The same mechanism that turned wild wolves into the dog curled up at your feet is the same mechanism, running in reverse, that turns curious island birds into animals who scatter the instant they hear your footsteps. So now reconstruct the bigger picture. 10,000 generations of animals that didn't fear you gone, because that lack of fear became a fatal flaw. The ones still here today, the deer that bolts, the crow that watches you from 3 trees away and never lets you get closer, the fox that vanishes the second it hears a human voice in the wind, they are the descendants of survivors. Every flinch, every frozen muscle, every silent retreat into the brush is the inherited memory of a species that learned, the hard way, what you're capable of. This isn't ancient history confined to woolly mammoths and sailors on a forgotten island. It's still happening. Wildlife near cities and roads shows measurably different stress responses than wildlife in untouched wilderness, recalibrating in real time to a species that never stopped being unpredictable, never stopped being a threat. Every time a deer breaks into a sprint at the sound of a twig snapping under your boot, it's not paranoia. It's 11,000 years of pattern recognition, distilled into a single, split-second decision. And maybe that's the part worth sitting with. You walk through a park or a forest trail or your own backyard, and you don't feel like a predator at all. You feel ordinary, soft-footed, harmless. But every bird that lifts off before you've taken 3 steps closer, every squirrel that freezes mid-stride and watches you pass, carries a kind of inherited knowledge you'll never consciously notice. They are not reacting to who you are as an individual. They are reacting to what your species has done again and again, for tens of thousands of years. A deer freezes the moment it hears your voice. Not your footsteps. Not your scent. Your voice. And somewhere in that frozen, listening silence is the entire history of what it means to be the animal every other animal learned to fear.